Hi, this is Miss Hafman from the Future Center, and I am talking to you today about some of the next steps once you've been admitted to college, specifically about building your schedule and registering for classes. You could say that this presentation is about how to pick the best classes for you, but I would say it is equally about how to not accidentally be put in the wrong classes. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about that and hope that makes sense. Of course, if you do have questions after this presentation, please contact the Future Center. We're happy to help you. We are here ready to answer your questions. All right, so before we go any further, let's talk for a minute about how your schedule is created when you go to college. One of the next steps after being admitted, you should be invited to an orientation. And sometimes as part of that orientation, you meet with an advisor. Sometimes that meeting with an advisor, it's a counselor, that happens after orientation. So I know that most colleges right now are sending out information about those orientations and advisor meetings virtually. And so you want to make sure you're checking your student account through the college for that information and that you're signing up for those, or checking the email that you use to create your application when you applied to that school. So make sure you're checking for those details and that you're signing up for those important meetings. One thing I want to, before we go any further, I want to talk a little bit about how college classes differ from high school classes, and how they're named, so that you can, when you see them on your schedule, you have an understanding of what that looks like, what you're seeing. So with a course name, usually the beginning of your course name starts with the abbreviation of the department, and then it is followed by a number, the course number, and then the course title. So colleges will usually have their courses numbered either in like a 100s level system, so 100s, 200s, 300s, and so on, or 1000s, so 1000s, 2000s, and so on. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Hopefully this makes sense. So here in these two examples, we have PSY 101, General Psychology. PSY is the abbreviation for the psychology department. It is the 101 level class, so it's a 100 level class, and the class title is General Psychology. In a system where they use the 1000s, here's another example. So ENG is for the English department, 1200, and English Composition 1 is the course title. So it's important to know that numbering system. We're going to come back to this in a minute and explain a little more why that's relevant. Let me show you now a couple of examples of some degrees. So in college, there are classes that are considered college level. These classes earn you credit towards your degree. So really important. When you choose your degree, you will be given a list of requirements that you must meet to earn your degree. So here's my first example. Here. So in this example, this is an example for a 4-year degree in chemistry. You can see that there are some classes that are specifically required that everyone has to take, and there are some times when you get to make a choice. All of these classes are at college level. So just so you know, this is just the first part of the list. You can see also when you're looking at this that there are a fair number of core classes like English, math, and social science. You can assume that as the student continues to the 3rd and 4th years, most of their classes are in chemistry. Here's another example. Here's an example. So this one is for a 2-year degree in criminal justice. There are a lot of similarities, and you can see that there are still some English and math requirements. You may also notice that the math classes in both of these examples are highlighted, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute and explain a little bit more about that. Now, sometimes students need a little bit of help to get to a college level. Maybe their math or reading or writing scores are not high enough to be successful. And so colleges have developed classes meant to support students and get them caught up. Show you these. Okay, so colleges will call these classes by different names. So here are some common ones that you might come across. Remedial, or Dev Ed, stands for Developmental Education. You might also see the words support, lab, or workshop associated with any of those remedial classes. Let me show you a few more examples from a college. These are classes from one college's math department. So these are math remedial classes. A big clue that you will see is that their course number starts with a 0. You'll also notice that remedial classes are in English or writing or in math. So again, here are some examples of that. You'll also see the word support or lab in these examples. So that generally does connotate that these are remedial classes, but not always. So let's flip back to our chemistry, our 2 examples of degrees. We're going to start with chemistry. So I highlighted the math classes in both of these examples. For each degree, there are different levels of math that are required to earn that degree. For example, for this chemistry program, you do need to complete multiple levels of calculus, which makes sense because there is a high level of math in chemistry. However, for a criminal justice major, you are expected to complete a statistics class, which is a lower level of math. And that makes a lot of sense because there isn't a lot of math needed for criminal justice. So why is that important to know? We've discovered, looking at students who have graduated from Westminster High School, Westminster Public Schools, that students were placed sometimes in remedial math classes because they couldn't test into college algebra or calculus. However, their major or their program of study didn't even require them to take that really high level of math. Had they known, they could have just taken the lower level of math that didn't even require a prerequisite or a minimum test score. So that's why it's really important to know what is required for your degree. So how is it decided whether or not you need these remedial classes? Flip over here. All right, so oftentimes an advisor will look at your SAT scores, or if you took a placement test called an AccuPlacer, they will use those scores. If you don't do anything at all, this is probably the only thing that an advisor will look at when making these decisions. The problem with that is that you took your SAT, the one that they're going to look at automatically in your junior year. And sometimes students have taken the AccuPlacer placement test maybe as early as 9th or 10th grade. So those can be pretty outdated. A lot of times students will ask, well, what is the minimum SAT score or AccuPlacer score that I need? And that also depends too. It depends on the class that you want to get into. Different classes will have different prerequisite requirements. So that is an excellent, excellent question to ask an advisor when you're talking about your classes. Now, before we go any further, I want to stress to you, remedial classes are not bad, okay? They're there to help students that really do need that help to get up to a college level in order to successfully earn their degree. So if you do need a remedial class, that is something that is there for you to take advantage of. However, we have noticed that there are a lot of instances for our former students where they've been placed incorrectly in remedial classes when they really didn't need that. And these classes do cost you money. They cost you money, they cost you time. Oftentimes the credit you earn, because it's not college level, it doesn't count towards your degree. And so we want you to avoid that if you don't need it. And that's why we're going over this information today. We want you to be able to recognize if you see one on a schedule of classes for you. And we want to give you some information that you can bring to an advisor. And that's where we're going to go next. What can you then bring to an advisor if you do want to, if you want to provide some evidence to show that you don't need this? So when you meet with an advisor, you should bring a few things with you. One of the biggest points that I do want to stress is that it is absolutely okay for you to ask questions when you meet with an advisor. Ask if you will get credit for classes they're recommending. Ask if that credit can be used towards your degree. Ask why you are being placed in a certain class. We're now going to go through a list of items that you might want to share. You can find this handout that I'm going to refer to on the Future Center website, as well as in the Empower activity with this video. So the first thing that you want to bring with you is a copy of your high school transcript. Many colleges will allow you to skip remedial classes if you have completed 11th grade levels in English or math. This can include classes like Englang 3 or Algeo 3. It can also include AP and IB, sometimes regardless of your AP and IB test scores. Usually colleges will also require that you earned at least a B or a 3.0 in the class and have a 3.0 overall GPA. Also, your SAT scores from 11th grade are on your transcript, but if you did an SAT retake, your advisor most certainly does not have those scores. So you want to bring in your SAT scores for any retakes you've taken. So if you did take college classes as a high school student, you would have a college transcript. You want to make sure you're bringing that college transcript in that shows successful completion of those classes, because that can also help you in arguing that you are ready for college level classes. Speaking of college credit, let's talk for a minute about those AP and IB credits. So when you take your exams, you will be given your scores, and you do need to make sure that your college receives those. They need to receive them to place credit for those classes on your transcript. You also want to make sure you are bringing that information to your advisor so they know that you've taken those tests. If you have the scores when you meet with your advisor, make sure you bring those. If you haven't, still tell them that you are waiting for those scores. You do not want to be placed in a class that you are potentially going to earn credit in through one of those exams. So make sure that they're aware of it. Okay, so the last part of this presentation is for those who have maybe tried to present this evidence and your school still wants you to take a remedial course. If you still feel you do not need the support, you can try one of these other options. So the first option, you can request to test out of a subject by taking a test called the CLEP exam. You would go through the school's testing center, or a local community college offers this. It does cost money to take this test. It's about $89, but it does give you the opportunity to show that you have the knowledge to in that subject area, and you would get college credit if you pass it. If you're interested in doing this, you want to go to the College Board website to check out some prep materials. Another option would be to take a 100 level class, an intro class in English or math at a community college. Community colleges do tend to be much more flexible in terms of remedial classes. So once you take that class at a community college, you would, if you're attending a 4-year public university, they are required to take that because it is a guaranteed transfer class. And once they transcript that, they then will no longer place you in a remedial class. So that's another option for you. The final thing I want to talk about is the AccuPlacer. I mentioned it earlier. This is a placement exam that colleges will often use to place students in classes. I'm going to suggest to you that you ask if you can provide other evidence instead of taking this test. Sometimes students don't do very well on it. And so if at all possible, see if they will take other evidence that we already covered. If you do have to take this test, please ask them to only test you in the subject that you need. So if they're only looking at math, ask that they not give you the reading and writing sections. All right, so that's a lot of information. I'm hoping you learned about the different levels of classes offered in college and recognize the difference between college level and remedial classes. Remember, this handout is available to you to print out, and it covers everything we've talked about today. The most important thing for you to know, it is absolutely okay to ask questions in this presentation or in this meeting with an advisor. If you have questions after today, please come to the Future Center. We're there to help with this. Thank you.